Here we go! Okay, let's go! And welcome everyone to another One Up XP Show podcast / interview, whatever you want to call these things. But it's always great because we get to share some awesome guests that have some amazing insight, whether it's something you might know in video games or something that you might not quite think of when it comes to video games. And today I have the distinct pleasure of talking to someone that has to do with video game music. Dr. Matthew Thompson, who is a clinical assistant professor of music at the University of Michigan. Dr. Matthew Thompson, welcome, brother. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to talk to you about video games and music. I mean, they go hand in hand. We know it. We know it's broken the pop culture window several times, if you will, because as soon as you hear the do, like, you know where it comes from. But whether it's 8-bit or a full-on orchestra, there are moments in video games where music is just needed and it fits so well. So thank you, Matthew, for being here. Appreciate it, brother.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about you and let's talk about some video games and music, of course. So obviously we know you're the clinical assistant professor of music at the University of Michigan. Very prestigious, very awesome school. My favorite school. I did not go there, but again, University of Michigan, hail. So how did video games and music all get you to where you are today? Take us back to tiny little Matthew. And I know video games are in your DNA, just like me and a lot of other people, but take us back from little Matthew to Matthew today. Like, how did it start and how did you get from point A to point B?
Well, in terms of video games, when I think about the very beginning, so I'm 40.
Okay.
Hey, you get so old, you have to start thinking about it.
37, right. Every year it gets a little bit worse. Like, oh man, which number just rotated over? Like, I can't remember. So
Totally.
we're very close.
I'm of a generation where my father actually had the Atari 2800. People just call it the Atari.
Yep.
You know, that was in the attic. It was actually put away growing up, and he got it out so my brother and I could play it. And I said to him one time, "Dad, why did you have that put away?" He said, "I stayed up all night. I could not stop playing." And then it'd be like 4 a.m. and I'm like, I have to get to work. You know,
Yep.
I'm playing this thing. So he found a huge draw for it, and we liked it too. And we got the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, all up.
Yep.
When I actually did take a little hiatus from gaming, to be honest, from like about 2006 to about 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I can still remember I was a huge fan of South Park at that time. And if you bought South Park, you got a World of Warcraft DVD game disc. You know what I mean? Because they had that episode where
Cartman wasted all of his time playing World of Warcraft. Yes. Classic episode. Totally. Classic episode.
Yeah. And game changing, because it was the first time they had put video game into a cartoon like that. So anyhow, I put it into my computer. I said, no, I want to get a doctorate. And I pressed eject, which was probably the better choice. But I love it. Then I started again gaming, and especially now that I'm teaching with it, I try to keep at least kind of current. Got you.
So you got your doctorate in music? I'm assuming just straight up music?
Collaborative piano.
So what kind of brought you to the video game side of things when it came to music? So take us to where you got your doctorate and to where you are now at the University of Michigan.
So I always had an interest, but it's like there's this almost, I don't know how to describe it other than coming out with gaming. Like, you don't know that your coworker at the next cubicle is a gamer.
Right, you don't.
So for instance, when I made up this class, my video game music class, I was talking to the registrar about it, and she said, "Oh, I love Witcher. I played Witcher 3 for 4 hours or whatever." And I'm like, "You play Witcher 3? I would have no idea this lady." But so I finished, I always had this interest. I finished my doctorate, and I had played video game music on the piano since I was a kid. I'd hear it in the games and then go over and do it. And I just always am looking at things and trying to figure out how can I use this as a teaching tool.
Hmm.
And so one of the deans called me one time and said, "You're good at doing things, good at making up courses that are of broad appeal. Is there something you can do that would attract a lot of our students?" And non music students even. And so I said something I should have said because of my doctorate, and then hung the phone up, called back 30 seconds later and said, "I really wish I'd said video game music. That's what I want to do." And so I started my class. We were just chatting before the beginning here about
Yeah.
how much growth there's been in the field.
Right.
When I started the class, there were about like 4 publications about video game audio.
Mhm.
And now
Yeah, it's all over the
you would
spread.
not believe it. It's a tsunami wave of things. So I'm not that, I don't think of myself as that much better or greater. I just happen to be like the person to start down the path first.
Right. I mean, there's always someone, obviously video game music's been around forever, but it's not something as a kid where it was like, yeah, not forever, but you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Since, obviously the arcade days.
1970s or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
But in my lifetime it's been around forever. But when you think about it, you didn't really think about how to pursue it or how to make video game music, so there wasn't really a whole lot of, and I say it kind of gets lost on the side streets, if you will, of a video game. But, nowadays, a great soundtrack just puts that game into so much more, like it puts it in a different atmosphere, if you will. Like when you look at Destiny, yes, Destiny's a good game. Bungie's a great creator, but Bungie has some of the best orchestral pieces of music in video games ever. I mean, you look at Halo, you look at Destiny, they brought in Paul McCartney to help and make some of the music. It was like, my goodness gracious, this would have been a good game without it. But when you add the music to it, it becomes almost like, I always call it church music when I hear the Halo theme. Like it just puts me back into like, that is church music to a gamer's ears. Like that is what we put at that epitome. It is the epitome of church music. But yeah, I feel like you kind of took that idea and ran with it. And then you start seeing a lot more people like, oh yeah, okay, I see this. I hear about it. Let's dive more into it because it is becoming a booming thing that a lot of people are very interested in now.
Well, I love that you mentioned the Halo example. Marty O'Donnell and I are friends. I have made world premiere recordings of some of his classical things. I have a stack of songs on my piano I'm hoping to record in a few months too. But yeah, and you know what's so interesting? So you're talking about the beginning of Halo,
Yeah,
that Gregorian chant, right?
correct.
So when you said video game music has been around forever, I kind of made a face actually, and the reason is because one of the things I love about teaching my course, the history of game audio, if we want to talk about the history of Western music, you're talking Gregorian chants, you're talking 400 or 500 years back
Right.
or further. That's hard to comprehend. But when I say, okay, we're really going to be talking about stuff from basically the 70s to present, that's 50-ish years. That's a manageable amount of history. People know people 50 years old. That feels much more manageable to me. So I love that example of the Gregorian chant there as the exact point to how old music can be, and that kind of stuff is incorporated into video games now.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm going to be interviewing here shortly Keith Brown, who also has a background in video game music, but he kind of put it in a great way too. When I was talking to him before our interview, we were talking. I was like, you can see the classic portions or the classical types of music and where they're incorporated into video game music. Like everything is built off something, obviously. So the first notes of music are going to be built off. But you just don't comprehend classic music, if you will, in Mario. But, there's hints of stuff in Mario. Yes, it's 8-bit, but, as it's grown, you can definitely hear the hints of where, the classic notes come from. But before we get too much into this, achievements. Give me everything that is on your list. Like you said, you sat down, your friend, totally forgot his name now, but wouldn't you help compose, did the Halo music?
Marty O'Donnell
Mario
did it.
O'Donnell, yes. You have a lot of achievements, and I wanted to just list them off, but that would have taken me a day and a half. So go through some of your biggest achievements here that you've had while doing music, but also at the same time doing a video game music class, because that's achievement in itself too at the University of Michigan.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I have a couple different projects really going right now. One is a video game related thing,
Hmm.
which I'm mostly focused on, but I also am doing some research on Korean art song. So I have
Really?
just interest. I kind of think of myself as, if it's cliche or well, but East meets West,
Right.
trying to see how those things come together. In terms of the video game stuff, yeah, I am writing a book right now about piano arrangements of video game music. I've played them
Really?
since I was a kid, like I said, and there are people who just go around and perform these. They win competitions with them.
Right.
I'm talking about serious classical, competitions playing these pieces. I can remember sitting in Rackham Auditorium here,
Hmm.
and I look around and this guy's playing this thing that I've played, for fun or at a party or something, and there's thousands of people cheering and screaming, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, there's something to this. Um, and actually, a lot of that stuff that I do in terms of my research, that project that's now coming into this book was started because a student asked me, said, "Have you ever looked at these piano arrangements of video game stuff? I hadn't thought about it in years. I just kind of played it as a thing on the side for fun."
Right.
And when he mentioned it to me, I thought, "Oh, I get so much inspiration from my students." But I would say, some of the big gaming accolades. I run the Ludomusicology Sound Studies
Okay.
wing of a conference that's industry-based, Game Sound Con, up here to my
I was gonna
corner.
say I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
This, I hope this is, or some similar image of this is going to be the cover of my book.
Very
But
cool.
this is from when I hosted the North American Conference on Video Game Music at the University of Michigan. That's the only scholarly conference on video game music in North America.
That's
That's going to be
cool.
coming up in February in Florida this year.
Very cool. I love that a lot. I mean, that is a huge achievement. I mean, it's the only scholarly one out there, dude. And again, hats off to you. But I like that a lot. So we've talked about you, your achievements in your class, but what is the goal of your video game music class? Like, so what are we trying to accomplish? If I signed up right now and I walk into your class tomorrow, what are we trying to accomplish?
That class I think of as basically music appreciation class taught through
Okay.
the lens of video game music. Now, if it's a typical semester, and they typically are, um, there will be people in the class who don't play games
Hmm.
and are taking it to see how a professor could possibly talk about video games for a whole semester, much less just the music.
Right.
And we have all the way on the other side of the spectrum people who have already created, published games,
Mhm.
and are making sound, music, audio for them. And then there's me in the middle, and most people probably gravitate around that, which is I play for fun. I enjoy it. I don't really have a stake in the career,
Mhm.
other than using it as a teaching tool. Um, and wherever you are, I hope you learn more and grow. And I've had people go straight into the industry and work at EA or something like that
Right.
after the class. And I've had people who just write me a note and say this was outside of my STEM education, and it was so nice to have something creative.
I love it. I love every aspect of it. Because you can take it and run with it, or you could take it and be like, okay, now I'm appreciative of it. Because I
Exactly.
think a lot of people don't realize just how big music is, especially when it comes to the video game realm, because it does make or break a video game in many instances. Like I can tell you a lot of games that I played that didn't have music or didn't have a good soundtrack, and it doesn't click. It's fun for a little bit, but what draws you back in some cases might be kind of that music to some of these games.
Hmm.
Like the fact when you turn on Halo, Halo is going to be a big name just because it is such a prominent thing, or 007 for N64 obviously has the Bond theme to it, but obviously when you turn those games on, it's nostalgia. I mean, it hits
Hmm.
you 100% right in the feels. Same with Mario. I mean, you start playing the first world of Mario and it's like, oh man, you know this song, or Contra, or any of these games. There's certain aspects to them that just take you back to these memories or fond memories of a childhood. And it's like, yeah, that hits home. So getting to questions now, kind of the meat of the segment here. But how did you pursue video game music? Obviously, we kind of got, you just kind of threw it out, and you got a
Hmm.
game in, or you got a class to teach. But did you ever think this was going to be possible? How did you just pursue something like this?
You've been kind to point out that I was in this early group of people who were
Right.
saying it. I so for instance, the first person in the Western world to really write scholarly work, Casey Collins, um, literally finished the doctorate, and then the next day started writing a book about video games
Really?
because you couldn't really combine the two.
Right.
And so I knew myself, I want to get a degree where I'm going to be able to have a skill. And if I can play with the singers, if I can do these things, I know that I understand how that life works. But I wanted to try this crazy idea of teaching out. And you were just
Right.
mentioning, the nostalgia of the old games. One of the things as a music teacher that is so useful, a lot of video game music loops,
Hmm.
right? It
Correct.
repeats because
Right.
this is why I find game audio so interesting. Most music you put on, let's say you're listening to Love on Top or whatever, it's going to be like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus,
Right.
up a half step, end,
Right.
right? And it only goes that way.
Hmm.
But see, with a video game, gameplay is nonlinear. You don't know how long it's going to take a particular person
Right.
to complete something. So one of the tactics that they use is looping. So if you think about that, music is linear, gameplay is nonlinear. So we've got to make the music somehow um, adjustable. And what that does as a music teacher is it means people have heard these themes again and again and again and again and again.
Right.
And that repetition allows me to talk about it and allows me to explain the structure of it very easily because it's really drilled into your head.
Right. It really is. And I keep forgetting, but Sonic. Sonic is another one. That was 16-bit. That was our introduction to 16-bit sound, if you will. But that was on loop. Like, so when you're playing them, obviously you're just running through the level, but there's a certain amount of time they have to play with where it's looping, and then you get to the end, and the end music plays. Same with Mario. You had 300 seconds, I believe, to get through the level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on constant repeat until you get to the flag. And then when the flag goes down, the music stops, and then you get the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So, and then each world has their own looping music. But yeah, you're exactly correct. Even in games today, Destiny being, again, a fine example, but you're in a certain spot in the map, you have a certain music. You get to a boss, the music unloops and goes to a different section, and you have boss fight. I never really thought about it that way. Linear meaning the loop.
Can I also point out, actually, in the case of Mario, I actually think Koji Kondo made a mistake. I'm reticent to say this, but
Hot
when
take.
you hear me out, hear me out.
Yep.
The original overworld theme in Mario that we can all sing, da 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 da,
Yep.
is 90 seconds long.
Okay.
But when you go down a pipe,
Doo,
da
doo,
da
doo.
da da da, the music changes. If you die, the music changes. And in Super Mario 2 and 3,
Oh, God.
he would only make a 30-second
Oh, really?
overworld theme. Because I think he realized nobody was actually hearing it. Who is on the main screen unless you're just standing there watching the timer count down
Right.
for 90 seconds without dying or going down a pipe and getting a star?
Right.
Nowadays, in a more modern game, they would bring the music back in where you left it,
Right.
so that you would end up hearing the whole thing. But back then, it restarted at the very beginning.
Got you. Okay. I mean, Mario 2, we don't talk about that here. Mario 2 was just something else. I mean, the music was good, but like, yeah, I don't know what they were on when they decided, hey, let's make this Mario 2. Because Mario 3 was like back to, okay, we're back. I was like, yeah, thank you. Mario 2, man. Woo. That was a different one. All right. So we know this question. Obviously, you and I know this is important, but let's play devil's advocate. Is music in video games important?
Yeah, and let me tell you why. I mean, and I'm thinking right this minute from a player standpoint, okay?
Right.
So music communicates all kinds of things to you. For
Right.
instance, it communicates the era and setting. Is it medieval with these horns and trumpets and things, or is it,
Mhm.
it communicates your gameplay pace. For instance,
Right.
Mario, da 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 da, and then everything plays double speed, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's telling you better hurry up and get to the end.
Get your tail moving, brother.
Game audio actually, so and we're on this Zoom here right now, but you can only see this much. But if this were a video game and something over here off screen I could hear it,
Right.
but I would not be able to see. But that would tell me you need to look because you have a very limited range of what you can see,
Yeah,
even in
field
a
of view.
virtual reality
Right.
setting. You need to have things to direct you. So, the way it builds up. You were talking about all these games that I don't really play a lot, but know, of course, for research purposes. But when you're headed toward the boss and like these different layers of the music come in, maybe it's the bass and then the drums and this stuff, and
Right.
also it's a full orchestral thing, and you're facing the monster. It just feels like you have ramped up perfectly if they've done it right for
Right.
that. So yeah, in terms of increasing immersion, which is number one, but is critical. But there's also all this communication
Right.
that audio can give a player.
Right. And I think that's kind of something, a lot of things that kind of, again, when I said when it goes under the radar, people don't understand what music does then ties you to a certain aspect of a game. Like you said, when a boss fight, yeah, you're intense, but it adds that intensification. Like if you're just playing and you go to a boss and there's no music to intensify the situation, it's just a boss fight. But when you have that intensification with the music, then you're even deeper into the game. A game can take you 15 levels deeper into it with just music. The right music can make it that much more impactful. And,
Yeah.
and like, happy go lucky, like we were talking earlier before. Yeah, Mario has the characters dancing at certain points, and there's other games that have implemented that as well.
Mhm.
But it's like, yeah, they're happy go lucky, put you in the game. And then, obviously you get to Bowser, dun dun dun. Like there's deeper intensification to it. So music can transport you even more so than a game can. So when you have those two layers, it's almost like, one can take you somewhere else, but the other layer can take you even deeper into what you're playing. So I definitely understand that 100%. So let's talk about this aspect of it. Obviously, here on the show, we talk about the education, information, and kind of how to pursue this, because a lot of it might not be understood just yet. How do you pursue playing music for video games? But if a kid or young adult is interested in some field of music, including video game music, how do they pursue that? Like, obviously, you kind of had the music background, you had a doctorate, and you had the ability to say, yeah, I would like to teach a video game music class. For me, again, I'm a year and a half into the show, but I was like, why haven't I had music on just yet? Music to me is one of those things where it's like, there's no clear path for me to pursue this for video games. How would you do that? How do you know of any ways to kind of travel down that road to follow up on video game music?
Yeah. So a few things come to mind here. So one is, I mean, you're right. This is a field where, as one of the early experts says, there are a lot of butts and not a lot of chairs.
Right.
And so it's definitely, let's just start there. There are a lot of people who are interested in this. There are people I know who are players you're talking about, let's play on the soundtrack. So for instance, this one person who actually graduated from U of M, now lives in Florida, Kristen, and she plays on like God of War, like everything you're hearing that's come out in the last year. Her Facebook feed is just like, oh, this came out, this came out, this came out.
That's awesome.
She just records right, there in Florida, and beams her part in. People will say it needs to fit with this track or be at this metronome mark, and they can have some dialogue. But you can be a session musician these days, and especially after the pandemic, you can be anywhere. If you are known for playing these crazy, she'll buy anything. I think she has 100 different instruments. She'll teach herself to play it, and so that is one way to being a session musician. You no longer have to live in LA. Now it helps if you live in LA or around, being in the right area.
So is it kind of like freelancing, if you will?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Session players, we would say. Then, if you're wanting to actually make the music, you want to create it, it's almost a catch-22, because in order to be seriously considered as a creator, you have to have your sound and music in a working 3D interactive environment. Well, how do you get that? It's a catch-22. How do I get that? But what you would want to do, and I suggest to people, is, like at U of M, we have game design class, and my class members can choose to pair up with them and actually leave in their portfolio, if they'd like, with their sound and music in a working game, so that then you can say, I make this kind of media. It used to be enough to just have a website, put up some soundtracks that
Right.
sounded cool, and people would maybe be interested if you pinged them at an industry event. But nowadays, you really need to show that you understand how the music works and how it's interactive in the ways that we've described. It's not quite linear.
That's really cool. I never thought of it that way, where you have a game design class matching up with your class. And yeah, that would look really good on a resume. Very good. Yeah, I went to U of M and worked with a game design student and put my music in the game. Like that is super, super cool. I never thought of it kind of taking that route. I thought maybe more of, yeah, you're in a band, say like you're in a high school band, but you love video games. You get to college, you take your class or you take a video game class of some sort, continue to pursue music. Yeah, you have the freelance way, like you mentioned. And I've heard of routes of that way. Obviously, freelancing is much harder because you kind of have to find a foot in the door, then you can continue
Right.
on. But yeah, I guess it goes hand in hand. So if somebody's doing something else, kind of work with them, like the video game graphic or making a video game class. Yeah, that's actually really cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, and also I want to say, not to plug something I'm involved with, but if somebody's interested, one of the things like Game Sound Con, this industry-based conference where I run the academic part,
Oh, nice.
that is really a place for people. I would say most people are like 18 to 30,
Right.
and they either are interested in making music, maybe they've made music for video, or maybe they've made music for a podcast, or I don't know, some sort of thing, but they're wanting to know what is the industry like in games and how can they get involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
You can come to a thing like that. Now, sometimes I see people there at GameStop passing out their cards. I'm like, there's 400 people here doing the
Right.
same thing.
Yeah.
This is not the place to pass out the card, but this is the place where you learn where you would go to pass out your card,
Right.
or what skills you need to have in order to really make yourself marketable.
Really networking. I mean, that's a spot for networking. Meet and greet everybody, talk, find the background. If that's something that's, not exactly your forte, because I know social goes many different ways. That is where you come out of your shell because it could pay off in spades down the
Totally.
road. So next question. Obviously, childhood memories are attached to certain video games and the music. What does this? Why? What grabs onto it? So 20 years down the line, I fire up the Nintendo, I blow on the cartridge, pop it in, and there's Duck Hunt or there's Mario, there's whatever game I'm putting in, and the music instantly takes me back to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. What does this? What is it about music that does this?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer exactly to that, because I bottle it and
Right?
get really rich.
Sell it. Yeah.
I can say to you that, just as smells have nostalgia,
Right.
or all kinds of different senses are engaged, and there are scholars who really focus on nostalgia and music. And here we are, it's a few days before Christmas while we're recording this. Think about that nostalgia. Almost all the music that you hear on the radio, Christmas music, is from like the 50s,
Right.
or before, or 60s, right? Very little. I mean, Mariah Carey has had one breakthrough into it,
Yeah.
but there's something about the sounds that you heard from long ago, you associate it with your family or with a certain situation. I certainly think back to just a carefree, no adult pressure sort of thing, which I wish I could have these days. And that's what makes it seem to me fun. I think that the melody or the pieces of music are timeless because they're well done.
Right.
And that's really the bottom line of it. But there is absolutely, as you say, I don't know why, but I'm not that kind of a scholar, but there is unquestionably nostalgia for everybody with these game tunes. Can I tell you one funny story?
Yeah, go for it.
So in my class, one of the games that we look at often is Pitfall. This is from 1982.
Yep.
And I can still remember, it's not a game I knew well at all. I can still remember going on YouTube, and when the guy is swinging over the pits, there's this yodeling. It just sounds awful. It's just bleeding. And in the comments on YouTube, someone's like, "Oh, I'm getting emotional hearing this yodel sound." And I'm like, "Really?" It's the worst thing I've ever heard, but it's still for people has that effect.
Yep. And it's just so odd because, like, You know, it's funny because the Mario movie came out, or the trailer for the new Mario movie, right? And everyone's up in arms because Chris Pratt's voice isn't the guy who did Mario, but everyone's like, "Oh, dude, the theme song was great." They completely redid that in kind of like a very dark, kind of leading way into Mario, but it was the Mario theme song. And it's like you could do anything with that song, and everyone's gonna love it. You can't do the same with Mario's voice, apparently, but everybody's going to love that music. But it just takes you back, like you said, too. I think the carefree thing is just a huge thing of it, because we would anytime I hear the Bond theme, it just takes me back to those nights where we had unplanned sleepovers because we were playing for 8-9 hours for four buddies down in the basement on an old CRT TV. It's just something about it. Even today's music, it's just you turn on a game that I haven't played in 2 years, like Destiny. I'll play it again probably next January when it comes out. I haven't played it in about 6 months, 4 months probably. But like as soon as that music comes on, it's like, oh man, Destiny. Halo was the same way when Halo came out last year. Kicked it on for the first time in a long time. And it was like, oh my God, I'm right back to college playing LANs again. So there's something to video game music that I think it's just music in general, especially pop songs, but video game music especially, because I think a big thing of it, and stop me if you know or can add anything to it, but I think the evolution of game music. So you go from your Pitfalls, your Ataris, to 8-bit to 16-bit to 32-bit to actual full-on orchestras and actual theme music. It kind of attached itself in many ways that people probably didn't think of. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're seeing game music getting better over time because you're adding more layers to it. And when that 8-bit hits you, it's like, oh man, that's so nostalgic. And then the orchestra now hits you, but it's the same song. It's like, man, that's so good. But it's the same music. It's just, obviously a little bit layered. But yeah, it's something weird.
Well, I would say, I always want to be careful to not say one thing is better than another. I like the 8-bit. I like the 16-bit. I like those sampled MIDI era things. And I have a lot of students who say, I'm guessing you've played Pong. Almost everybody has. Pong. And, the designers of that game, like Al Alcorn, is in an interview saying, they said, we want hisses and boos when you lose and cheers when you're doing well.
Right.
But they didn't have the capacity to create that at the time. It was boop, 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 boop. That's basically all you got was when it goes out. But or I'm thinking about early RPGs that I played, like Final Fantasy or something. Right. I'm sure it's the same in Halo. You have character themes, and then here it's in minor suddenly because the character's ill or we're sad, and here it's in major, and now it's triumphant sounding. These techniques, these leitmotifs, or adapting a theme throughout a game to mean different things at different times, that stuff has been going on for a really long time, whether the quality of sound was those blips and bloops, which I love, or whether we're at full orchestral recording. So the music has also a huge impact because of the emotional state that it conveys. One of the biggest things I often worry about in games, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games of all time. Very influential for me and many people.
Yep.
But when they announced the remake, I was terrified. And I'll tell you why. Because what has changed between 1997 and now is voice acting. It's much more prominent and possible.
Right.
And when you think about the hierarchy of game audio, the top thing you must be able to hear, plot-based dialogue, then probably sound effects, then maybe music and ambient after that. So I thought, when they stab Aerith, spoiler alert, it's going to be, instead of this music, because in the original, what kicks in is music. It's her theme, and you're like, oh my God, this character has died, and doesn't happen.
Right.
The music had to convey a weight before voice acting was really so prominent. Now we have it all, and I actually think they did really well with Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I'll just put that out there too.
Yeah, it was really well done. For me, I wasn't such a Final Fantasy kid as I am more now. Like now, I'm touching games that I didn't play much as a kid. As a kid, it was more, I was a huge Resident Evil kid, but Resident Evil had some really good music in those games. And sports games, obviously, before they started taking all the music off of hot number or top 40 hits now, they were making their own music. So it was much different. But yeah, I always cringe, or I always have that in the back of my head too, when somebody says we're remaking something, it's like,
Mm.
don't screw this up. Like,
Right.
obviously I'm a huge fan of Back to the Future. If they ever decide to touch this movie again, which will happen somewhere down the line, but please do not screw this up. Like, the power of love is always engraved in my head as something good. I don't need a
Yeah.
remake of somebody screwing up the power of love and having Marty as like Zac Efron. Don't do it, please. But yeah, that's that's a different subject for a different podcast. But we're talking Bungie, 343, Nintendo, Sega, Konami. The list goes on forever and ever. Obviously, they probably used the same people back in the day when it came to video game music. I mean, I think rumor had it Michael Jackson was even on to do Sonic, but I don't know if they actually used some of his stuff. But he was part of that phenomenal Sonic 3 soundtrack, I believe. But the list goes on forever. Who has the best video game music?
I thought this was coming.
Like, I mean, I'm not to kind of put you on the spotlight, but who's done it correctly, if you will, for the last 20, 30 years?
Well, I would say, again, I have, because of you're talking about your gaming background. And if we have a second, I want to circle back to sports games.
Oh, yeah,
this
for
is
sure.
something interesting about the sound there. But so I would say my all-time favorites are Nobuo Uematsu. This is the person who did Final Fantasy and many other games before and after that, but really notoriety for that. And Yoko Shimomura.
Mm-hmm.
And Yoko Shimomura, I want to highlight her career for a minute. This is a woman who has been more versatile in terms of major franchise than I think any other person. Her first big hit, Street Fighter II.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Lights
and
out.
She also, I mean, right there, and also she did the music for Super Mario RPG. So she's done a Mario IP. She did the music for Final Fantasy 15. She's done a Final Fantasy IP, and she made the music for Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, wow.
And those are just a few. Those are just the big blockbuster things. This woman has done from fighting games to the biggest RPGs that and she's exceptional. And I think about, you were talking about inspiring kids. I love her story. She went to school and her parents said, we want you to become a college professor, like a good, student and teach that. And she sent in a demo tape to Capcom and she was like, oh, I think I've embarrassed my parents by not, fulfilling their dream. But think about what she's done with music that she would not have done otherwise.
Right. I mean, that's huge. When you talk about a resume, that's an impressive resume. I guess my thing is with video game music, I'm not familiar with every artist that, lays it down. But like you said, she's gone from Street Fighter 2, which was one of the biggest games of its time, to Kingdom Hearts, which is probably notably one of the biggest games that people continue to wait for sequels for. And it's just, again, a great game that has a great soundtrack. I mean, Final Fantasy that kind of what set it aside as some of the best games out ever is the music to it. It's very much like The Legend of Zelda. Legend of Zelda has some of the best music from start to now. Breath of the Wild was phenomenally done, whether it was sound around you or it was actually the music in it. Yes. I mean, there's certain games, especially RPG games, that will take you on a ride. And then you're never going to be off that ride. One that sticks out for me recently is New World from Amazon. They had a very, very good, it's a huge RPG game that Amazon made. And it's very much, you're going to different sections of this open world, but each open world has different sets of music, and orchestrally. So it's so well done. Cause if you get in a fight, obviously things get intense. And if you're just running around chopping trees, there's a nice soothing background music to it that if you listen closely, it's really, really well done. So it's just something that you might not think about, but it is impacting you in several different ways. What were you going to say about sports games?
Oh, yeah. Just really briefly, sports games, that's an interesting one, right? They have very little music except what you're talking about, licensed music.
Right.
But what is so unique about them is, the chanting and the crowd sounds.
Right.
In the same way that, you would ramp up the music, you're going to record a live crowd. It's somebody's job to fly around to Barcelona and Berlin and whatever, because every different crowd has their own chants, their own sounds,
Yep.
and it has to sound authentic and unique, and they record it, and then as you play, the crowd sound can get ramped up if it's a really exciting
Yep.
thing. So there's a lot of sculpting and work that actually happens with the environmental sounds in a sports game.
Same with we had Haggerty on to talk about their partnership with Sony, and Haggerty is a classic car insurance company, but they had their classic cars inside of the new racing game for Sony PlayStation, their flagship. Why can't I think of the name of it? Gran Turismo 7.
Oh,
they went to all their classic cars and got actual sound of those cars on, or the cars that portrayed those cars, or the same car, but they found them all around the world, got the actual sound from those cars. So when you're driving them in game, that is actual sound. And people don't realize how big of a difference it makes. Like if you're making,
huge.
If you're playing a game that is computer generated sound versus a real set of sound, obviously a big difference. So we're now in the generation of things like that being a huge thing. They have to get that sound just right. But video game music is a similar vein. You want the right sound for the right situation in the right scenarios throughout those games. Do you think the game's popularity benefits from the music or soundtrack?
Oh, totally. I think, these days, ideally, if your game has great music,
right,
you are going to leave that, and there's going to be orchestral concerts of it. It's going to stream. People will encounter it because of the music and then maybe be more drawn into the game. I certainly do that. I do think I'm an oddball in that way. But I think, all of these different things, when you see these big concerts or you see streaming or people are re-recording it as a hard rock album when it was the orchestral thing.
Right.
These are all added revenue and added chances for people to encounter your IP and become a fan of the game and purchase it. So that's what they want. I mean, every game company wants everything to go huge like that because that helps everybody.
And it's funny you mentioned concerts. My buddy, probably 6 years ago now, probably 6 or 5 years ago, he got his mom tickets to see Paul McCartney in Detroit. And Paul McCartney plays 2.5 hours. Like the guy spans his entire catalog. But he was there, and this is a guy that I played Destiny with daily. And Paul McCartney out of nowhere, halfway through the show, goes, "Majority of you will not know this, but those who do enjoy." And he played a piece from Destiny. And my buddy's like, "Oh my God, I know this. This is the level where I'm doing this and doing that." And his mom looked at him and was like, "What? What is this?" She's like, "This is from Destiny when he recorded video game music." And everyone was like, everyone didn't really know it, but of course they're happy because Paul McCartney's there playing it. But my buddy was like, "He's playing the part from Destiny." I was like, "That's sick." I would have definitely been on board for that. Plus, Hey Jude and all that other stuff. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
What should you get done? Last question before we get into our fun little game here. But what should you get done in high school before pursuing music or video game music in college? If there is anything.
I would just say, take instrumental lessons, play around with composition software. It's really a different world than it was because you can make music quite easily with your computer.
Right.
So I would say just play around, dream up some characters, draw. If you've got artistic skill, draw a character. And here's the theme that I would make for that character. And just start to think from the mindset of those creative people and see what comes of it for you.
So use the passion. Put it to work, and the work that you put into the passion, you'll see things happen. Just when you think it's not going to happen, don't give up, because I guarantee you that's where it's like, oh man, this looks so bleak, and all of a sudden, bright lights. There it is.
Yeah.
So, we're talking to Dr. Matthew Thompson, who's a clinical assistant professor of music at the University of Michigan, talking about video game music. All right, so we have a really fun game here, Matthew, that we play with all of our guests. The questions have changed over the last year, but it's called 10 questions to earn a 1-up. So that little, wait, where is he? He's over here somewhere. There he is, the green mushroom. Yeah, you want to earn a 1-up, right? Because
okay, I do.
If life wants to maybe take one of them, you have an extra one. So but no, I kid you, do not go out and die, because you will not come back after these 10 questions. But this is called 10 questions to earn 1-up, the hardest 10 questions that you'll ever have to take. But I promise you will not ruin our friendship. Dr. Matthew Thompson, are you ready to take the 10 questions to earn 1-up?
I'm ready.
All right. Number one, Matthew, what is the perfect sandwich?
I love an Italian, like a grinder sort of situation.
Yeah. That's the first grinder we've had as an answer. But Mancino's grinders, I don't know if you have Mancino's. Remember Mancino's?
I don't know it. I'll check it out.
I don't know how many Mancino's are around anymore, but Mancino's grinders. They're a Michigan pizza pub, but they make grinders. A turkey, it's toasted, but turkey, cheese, mayo, and I think like the tomatoes on it. Oh, it's so good. Grinders are so good in general. Whew. Number 2, iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
All right, thank you. Whew. We're starting to get back to iPhone taking the lead. Like the first questions I asked this to, everyone's like, Android. They're like, no, stop. It's the wrong answer. Number 3, Matthew, what is the scariest animal?
I'm going to say stingray.
Oh, Steve Irwin would agree with you.
No, that's what I was just thinking. No, I'm fascinated by them, but anything in the ocean, it just comes up. Like in the forest, I can see that there's a deer. I can't see that there's a shark till it's coming out of the water.
Correct. Yeah, you can't see anything underneath that. So unless you're above it, yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If I did see a stingray in real life, like I've touched them in controlled instances, but like, yeah, if I'm swimming, all of a sudden I have this big old stingray swinging by. Oh, I'm losing it. I'll be the fastest swimmer you've ever seen getting out of those waters. Number 4. Now, if we can't get one here, like I found that some questions might not translate best, we'll switch it up. But what is what is your favorite sports movie?
Sports movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Tobey Maguire. It came to my head. Does that count?
Oh, Jerry Maguire?
Jerry Maguire, thank you. There you go. Now you see how many sports movies I was.
Toby? Toby has a movie out? Yeah, Spider-Man. But no, Jerry Maguire. That's a great movie. Show me the money. Tom Cruise. It's a classic. Actually, the first one that has mentioned Jerry Maguire. I believe that won an Oscar. I believe it did. Yeah, but that was a good movie. A very good one. That's another one. See, everyone keeps giving me movies I forgot about when it comes to sports movies. So that's a good one. Number 5. All right. Would you rather spend a week in the forest or one night in a haunted house?
I'd do one night in a haunted house. Right. I like the idea of terror, and it's just one night. I can deal with anything.
Yep, there you go. Me too. Number 6. Oh, this one's the toughest question on you. Number 6. What number am I thinking of?
7.
Oh. Number 7. Plane, train, or automobile? There's no right answer to number 6, by the way.
Yeah, I was wondering, but there was no limit. I'm like, how am I supposed to know what range? Negative infinity. Anyway, so plane, train, automobile. Am I talking about myself traveling? I probably would prefer to be driving, but if I want to go a fun place, a plane.
Okay. Number 8. What is Matthew Thompson's biggest fear?
I think it would be something very deep, like not living up to my potential and looking back and feeling I'd wasted life.
There you go. I like it. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Not so much a daily fear, but the fear of just not being able to do or doing something, but not mounting up to what you could do. I think that resonates between a lot of people. Number 9, DC or Marvel guy?
I am going to go with. Oh, that is a tough choice. I'm going to go with Marvel.
All right. I'm movie-wise, I'm right with you, but comic-wise, I was always a DC kid. I love Batman, but we're not going to talk about the cluster that is HBO and Warner Brothers. Number 10. This one might be tough for you because you are a music background. All right? This is one I leave people with, and it's not easy. One song for the rest of your life, Matthew, on repeat. What is it?
I'm going to go not what you're expecting at all.
Okay.
Desert Island for me is Goldberg Variations of Bach.
So Bach.
This is what Yes,
Okay.
but there's a piece. It's like 30 minutes long.
Okay.
It's very mathematically precise and perfect. It's what Hannibal Lecter is listening to when he
Oh.
kills people.
Okay,
It's
got
his
it.
genius work.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, bye. Nice. Actually, you're the quickest one to pop that out there. So
I know my
Kudos.
desert island. Believe me.
kudos to you. With that, Matthew, Dr. Matthew Thompson, you are off the hot seat. You have earned your one up. I appreciate you being here, brother. I really do. Again, Dr. Matthew Thompson, Clinical Assistant Professor of Music at the University of Michigan. What else do you have going on in life for people to check out? Or if you have anything that is on the horizon for us to keep an eye on, what do you got going on?
Well, actually, you're hitting me at a period where I really don't have very much stuff at all because I'm determined to finish my book. So I've taken like no professional appointments or performances for the first time in a long time for like months.
Awesome.
But you can read about me at the UMISH website, or you can enjoy some Korean song, KoreanArtSongResource.com if you're into Korean art song.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, brother. I do appreciate it. And again, thank you for joining me on this session where we're connecting at probably the most important part of video games, man, the music. So I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Here we go.